Hi, I'm Rowan. Christmas should have brought us together. Instead, my mother pointed at my wheelchair-bound grandfather and spat, "You're useless. Get out." When I defended him, my father punched me so hard I saw stars. "Take that old man and leave." And just like that, we were thrown into the snow like garbage. What they didn't know? The man they tossed aside owned everything they worshipped. And when he stood up, he didn't just walk. He burned their legacy to the ground. What happened next? Even the devil would have shivered. Snow had been falling since noon, the kind that looked soft from the window, but stung when it hit your skin. The house was glowing, all gold, silver, and glass. The kind of Christmas my mother lived for. She called it tradition, though I never figured out whose tradition it was. Maybe just hers. The fire in the marble hearth was too perfect, every log angled as if a photographer had arranged it. My father sat at the head of the table, posture straight as a ruler, wearing that tailored navy suit he claimed made him look presidential. My mother, Lorraine, floated around in her sequined dress, correcting napkin folds and smiling for no one in particular. Then there was my grandfather, Ephraim, the man who built everything, the vineyard, the estate, the fortune that fed every glass of champagne in this room, now sat at the far end of the table in a wheelchair that looked too small for his pride. They'd put him by the window, as if he were part of the decor. Beside him, one chair sat empty. No one dared fill it. I sat near the middle, trying to breathe through the artificial cheer. The hum of small talk, the sound of silverware, the faint Christmas music from the next room. It all felt like someone had pressed pause on life. No one looked at Ephraim. Everyone acted as if the man who made us all possible was already gone. Dinner began with my mother's voice slicing through the silence. "To family," she said, raising her glass, "to a legacy that continues to grow." Everyone echoed, "To family," and clinked glasses. Everyone except Ephraim. His hand trembled as he tried to lift his. The glass slipped, spilling red wine onto the white tablecloth. The sound was small, but the silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's smile broke. "You're useless," she hissed. "Can't even hold a glass anymore." The words hit harder than the sound of the glass rolling onto the floor. My father didn't flinch. My sister Clara looked away. Guests pretended not to hear. I looked at Ephraim, his hands still shaking, his eyes lowering to the tablecloth like he'd just spilled blood. I felt heat rise in my chest. I'd watched this play out before. Every year, another way to erase the man who built everything. The chair beside him caught my eye again. The empty one. It felt like an invitation and a warning at the same time. I started to move toward it, but my father's eyes met mine. Cold. Controlling. I froze. My grandfather whispered, "Sorry, dear." His voice barely there. That was it. Something in me broke. I pushed my chair back. "Don't talk to him like that." Every fork stopped midair. Every breath held. My mother blinked like she couldn't believe what she heard. My father's voice came low and steady. "You will not embarrass your mother in this house." I stood straighter. My pulse pounded in my ears. "You already did." The air turned electric. Then came the sound, his fist slamming down. The wine glass toppled again, red streaks bleeding across the white cloth. He stood, towering over me. "You think you're a man now? Then get out. Take him with you." My mother's voice followed, colder than the snow outside. "Take that old man and leave." For a second, no one moved. Then I walked around the table, my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. I went to Ephraim, placed a hand on his shoulder, and turned his wheelchair toward the door. His hand brushed mine, cold, light, trembling. The butler opened the door without a word. The air outside bit hard. Snowflakes caught in my hair as we rolled out onto the porch. Behind us, laughter started again, soft and hollow. I looked back once through the frosted glass. They were already eating, pretending nothing had happened. Ephraim's voice broke the quiet. "Let it go, son. Sometimes silence is the only reply." I nodded, though my throat burned. "Maybe," I whispered, but silence never fixed anything. He said nothing more. I helped him down the ramp, the snow crunching under my boots. When we reached the end of the driveway, he stopped and reached into his coat pocket. His hand came out holding a small silver pocket watch, its surface worn smooth. "This clock doesn't lie," he said, placing it in my hand. "Remember that." The metal was warm from his palm, ticking softly, too alive for the night we were in. I didn't understand what he meant, but something in his tone made me grip it tight. We kept walking, the sound of tires in the distance, headlights flashing through the snow like ghosts passing by. The wind stung my face, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. Behind us, the mansion glowed, a golden cage fading into the storm. I looked once more at the lights flickering through the snow, then down at the watch ticking steady in my palm. That was the night our bloodline broke. But bloodlines have strange ways of remembering who truly built them. That thought had barely settled in my chest before his fist connected with my face. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even anger. It was something raw, primal, a flash of red, and then the crack across my jaw. My ears rang. My father's face was above me, contorted into something I didn't recognize. For a second, I thought he'd knock over the table too, just to prove he could. The wine glass exploded on the floor beside me, sharp edges catching the candlelight. I didn't even feel the pain, just the sound, and the silence after. That was louder than the punch. My mother gasped, but it wasn't concern. It was annoyance, like I'd embarrassed her dinner party. She clutched her pearls as if I'd broken them. No one stood. No one asked if I was all right. They just watched, or worse, looked away. And through it all, in the pocket of my coat, the old watch ticked, steady, mocking even. Time moved on. The family didn't. Gavin grabbed my collar and yanked me up like I was a drunk at some cheap bar. "You and that useless old man, get out of my house." I staggered to my feet, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. I wiped it away with the back of my hand and met his eyes. "You mean his house." That hit him harder than my fist ever could. For a second, something flickered across his face. Something close to shame. But it vanished. Lorraine stood now too. "You're nothing without us." Her voice cracked like thin glass. I didn't answer. I turned, walked to Ephraim, and without a word, wheeled him toward the front door. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. The door slammed behind us, sealing the night like a coffin. Outside, the cold was immediate, sharp. My hands froze on the wheelchair's metal handles. The snow hit sideways now, pushed by wind that howled like it knew we no longer belonged anywhere. I said nothing. "I wanted to believe your father would do better," Grandpa muttered. "I really did." I kept my eyes forward. "He did exactly what you taught him. Silence and control." He didn't argue. That silence between us, it was different. Not the kind that hides, the kind that listens. The gate came into view. As we passed it, the lights of the mansion blurred behind us, swallowed by the storm. We reached the truck. I helped Ephraim into the passenger seat and folded the chair into the back. The wind pushed at my back like it wanted me gone faster. Inside the cab, the silence felt heavier. The heater groaned to life, and I started the engine. Headlights lit the snow in front of us like a tunnel to nowhere. We drove. I didn't know where to look, so I looked back, not physically, but in my head. Mom's toasts every year, always about legacy, always about building something. But Ephraim's name had disappeared from the speeches long ago. Dad used to pull me aside after dinner. "Be a man, Rowan," he'd say. "Don't let emotion make you weak." Meanwhile, they moved Grandpa further from the table each year, like he was part of the furniture you didn't know what to do with. Every year, I whispered to myself, they built higher walls and buried love deeper beneath them. Ephraim didn't speak. I glanced over. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, hands folded. The bruises on my face didn't match the ones in his eyes. His went deeper. We reached the valley. The old vineyard house stood dark but proud. Smaller than the mansion, but real. Honest. I parked. We sat a moment, letting the engine tick down. "I'll get the door," I said. Inside, the air was still. It smelled of old oak, dried herbs, and memory. The lights were dim, but the place didn't need much to feel alive. Ephraim insisted on boiling water for tea himself. I watched him try to lift the kettle. His legs didn't move, but the stubbornness did. I stepped in, gently moved his hand aside, and took over. He sat at the table, watching me with that quiet look of his. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. "Defended you? They'll hate you now. They already did." He smiled, not with joy, but with a kind of peace, like I'd finally said what he'd been thinking for decades. We drank tea by candlelight, the snow dancing against the window. "This vineyard," he began, "survived more than most people know. Fires, floods, bad harvests, partners trying to steal it. But pride..." He shook his head. "Pride did the most damage." I nodded, unsure what to say. "The fruit only sweetens after the bitter years," he added. I looked down at the pocket watch still in my hand. The ticking sounded slower now, like it had adjusted to the rhythm of this place. He sipped his tea, staring into the flames in the fireplace. Then, calmly, he said, "Tomorrow, you'll come with me to the cellar. There's something you need to see." I raised an eyebrow, still feeling the weight of the night pressing behind my eyes. "What's in the cellar?" He didn't look at me, just smiled softly. "The truth, and maybe your inheritance." That night, I didn't sleep, because when a man like him says truth, it usually means someone's been hiding a lie. The old couch creaked beneath me as I shifted, listening to the wind batter against the vineyard walls. Morning sunlight eventually crept in through the frosted windows, laying streaks of gold across the dusty wooden floor. The room smelled of old grapes, dried herbs, and quiet. I sat up slowly, every muscle aching like I'd fought a war. My jaw throbbed. I reached for my phone. Still no messages, no missed calls, just silence. Not even my sister. In families like mine, silence wasn't absence. It was punishment. I walked into the kitchen. Ephraim was already up, dressed in a flannel shirt and reading an ancient copy of the Denver Post, like we hadn't been exiled from our bloodline less than 12 hours ago. "You slept like a stone," I muttered, pouring coffee into a chipped ceramic mug. He didn't look up. When you've lived long enough, betrayal stops feeling like a surprise. The steam from my cup curled into the air. I stared at it for a while, not drinking. Something inside me still refused to settle. 3 Christmases ago, Same table, same house, different temperature, but only just. It was Lorraine's idea. A grand holiday party with ice sculptures, a harpist, gold-rimmed china, and carefully curated guests from Gavin's business circles. Invitations had been sent out a month in advance. Everyone got one, except me. I only found out because my sister accidentally sent a group text about the catering truck arriving. When I showed up, the valet didn't recognize me. He almost sent me around back with the servers. Inside, the entry board displayed names in fancy cursive, hosted by Gavin and Lorraine Durrell, with special thanks to family, but no mention of mine, not even my initials. It wasn't a mistake, it was erasure. At one point during the evening, a man from Gavin's investment firm mistook me for staff, handed me his coat. I looked over at Lorraine, expecting her to correct him. She smiled instead. Didn't say a word. I handed the coat to someone else and walked out onto the balcony. That was the night I first realized my place in the family wasn't just lower. It was off the board. The coffee was bitter. I finally drank. "Do you remember the year Dad wouldn't let us toast?" I asked, not looking at Ephraim. He nodded. "The Generation of Excellence speech." "Yeah, that one." We were all seated, the wine poured by one of Dad's assistants, like always. Everyone's glass full, except mine and Ephraim's. I reached for the bottle, but Gavin beat me to it. "Don't," he said, smiling wide for the guests. "It's not for you two." The table laughed, that awkward, tight-chested kind of laugh people use when they know something's wrong, but don't want to be the one to say it. Ephraim had just looked down, folded his napkin, and nodded like he didn't hear, but I saw the way his hand clenched. "He wasn't weak," I said aloud. "He just didn't want to give them the satisfaction." Ephraim folded the paper and finally looked at me. "You knew they were cutting us out a long time ago, didn't you?" He didn't answer at first. Then he nodded. "I wanted to believe blood was enough," he said. "Turns out, blood's the first thing they spill when they feel threatened." It landed harder than any punch. Because it was true. Christmas night wasn't an eruption. It was a finale. Years of careful pushing, subtle smears, withheld affection, none of it random, all of it planned. He gestured toward the window. The vineyard sloped quietly under a light coat of snow. Rows of bare vines stood like skeletons in the cold morning. "See those?" he said. "Every winter they look dead, but the roots stay alive, waiting." "Waiting for spring," I finished. He nodded. "That's us." For the first time in days, I smiled. Not big. Just enough to know I still could. We weren't discarded. We were replanted. I pulled the pocket watch from my coat and held it to my ear. Still ticking. The sound didn't feel haunting anymore. It felt like a reminder. A pulse. "The clock doesn't lie," I whispered, not to him, but to myself. Ephraim pushed his chair back slowly, stood, shaky but proud. "Let's go to the cellar," he said. I paused. "Now?" He nodded. "It's time you learned why I never fought back." I stood too, heart thudding like I was about to open a door that couldn't be closed again. "What do you mean?" He looked at me square in the eye, voice low and even. "Because some battles aren't won in public. They're won in silence." I followed him down the narrow staircase, my boots creaking against the old wood. The cold thickened as we descended, the light from above growing dimmer with each step. The scent of oak barrels and thyme hung in the air, musty, still, with a faint sharpness of fermenting grapes. The cellar stretched longer than I remembered. Rows of casks stood like silent sentinels. Near the back wall, tucked between two heavy wine racks, sat a worn mahogany desk. The kind you'd expect to find in an old study, not a wine cellar. And behind it, an iron-bound chest. Ephraim reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key. His hand trembled slightly, but the lock clicked open without resistance. The lid groaned as it opened, revealing a folder no thicker than a few bills, yellowed, faintly curled at the edges. He took it with care, like a priest lifting a relic. "These are the papers they think don't exist," he said, not looking at me. He moved toward the desk and laid the folder flat, then slowly opened it. My name stared back at me. Rowan Durrell, listed clearly in black ink. Ephraim's signature below. The date 10 years ago. "This was the original will," he said quietly. "I gave you everything. The vineyard, the estate, full rights over the family trust." I stared at the page like it had teeth. "But it's not the will they have on file," he continued. "A year later, Gavin and Lorraine came to me. Said it was a minor update. Something about taxes. I didn't question it. I signed." His hand flipped to the next page. A version of the same document. But this time, the heir section was different. My name was crossed out, replaced by Gavin and Lorraine Durrell. I didn't speak. Couldn't. "They manipulated me," he said. "Not forged. Worse, they twisted my trust. That's harder to fix than ink." My throat tightened. "They didn't just cut me out of the family. They erased me from history." Ephraim nodded. "Paper makes powerful ghosts, Rowan, but ghosts can speak, if you know where to knock." That line stuck to my ribs. It would haunt me more than any threat ever could. He sat on a nearby barrel, sighing like the weight of a decade settled on his shoulders. After I retired, Gavin had his legal team draw up forms every few weeks, always in a rush. "Just sign here, Dad. It's routine." I didn't read every word. I trusted him. He looked at me. "They made it easy. Slipped things in. Called it simplifying the estate. I didn't see it coming." I remembered visiting that summer. I drove 2 hours to see him. The security guard stopped me at the gate, said my grandfather was resting. I waited an hour in the car and left. Now I knew. He wasn't resting. He was locked out, just like me. I gripped the pocket watch, the cold metal digging into my palm. The ticking grew louder, like it knew the truth too. "The clock doesn't lie," I said, more to myself than him. Ephraim didn't flinch. He watched me, steady and silent. "I want to burn it all down," I said. "But if I fight them now, they'll bury me just like they buried you, in paperwork and silence." Ephraim's eyes flickered. "Then don't fight them. Make them come to you." I blinked. "What?" He reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Thick, heavy, addressed in neat cursive to the Durrell Estate Board of Trustees. "I wrote this years ago, never mailed it. I wanted to see who'd push far enough to cross the final line." I stared at him. "You planned this?" He shook his head. "No, I prepared for it." There was a calm power in that answer. He hadn't been waiting to strike. He'd just made sure that when the moment came, he'd have truth in his corner. He stood again, slower this time, and looked around the cellar like he was memorizing it. "This place was built by hands that believed in something," he said. "They're gone now, but belief doesn't die with the builder." He handed me the envelope. "Tomorrow, we go to the city. You deliver this yourself." I nodded, my grip firm. "And then what?" He looked at the pocket watch, ticking rhythmically between us. "Then time does what it always does, exposes liars." I slid the envelope into my jacket pocket just before we left the cellar. The weight of it wasn't physical. It was the knowledge inside. That letter was more than parchment and ink. It was proof. It was betrayal. And it was the first move in a war that had waited far too long to begin. By the time we reached the edge of Denver, the morning sun had melted most of the frost off the windshield. Ephraim sat beside me, quiet, his gaze fixed on the buildings rising like jagged teeth from the horizon. The highway hummed beneath us, but my thoughts were louder. "I've walked into boardrooms where fortunes were made," I murmured, mostly to myself. "Negotiated contracts with men who could kill deals with a nod. But this feels like I'm walking into a firing squad." Ephraim didn't turn to look at me. He simply said, "Calm men frighten liars." That was all he offered. That was enough. We pulled into a parking garage on 17th Street. From there, it was a short walk to Durrell & Sons Legal, the same firm that had represented our family for 2 generations. Ironic, really. The very firm paid to protect the family legacy was now the place where I'd deliver the first nail in its coffin. Inside, the lobby smelled like leather and wealth. A young receptionist glanced up as we approached. Her polite smile faltered when she saw Ephraim. "I need this delivered to the Board of Trustees," I said, placing the sealed envelope on her desk. "Effective immediately." She hesitated, eyes dropping to the name scrawled in sharp pen across the seal, Ephraim Durrell. Without a word, she picked up the phone. A moment later, a heavy-set man in a tailored gray suit stepped out of a side office. His nameplate read, Malcolm Keene. He looked like he hadn't seen the sun in months. "Mr. Durrell," he stammered, his voice shaky. "We thought you were dying?" Ephraim finished for him. "You'll wish I was." He pushed the envelope across the counter. Keene took it with both hands, like he was holding a live grenade. I said nothing, but I saw the sweat bloom behind his ears. We didn't wait. We turned and walked out the same way we came. A block away, we ducked into a small cafe Ephraim used to frequent before retirement. The waitress, an older woman with sharp eyes and no-nonsense energy, recognized him instantly and brought us coffee without a word. Steam curled between us. I broke the silence. "Do you ever regret not fighting back sooner?" Ephraim stirred his coffee slowly, letting the spoon tap once against the side of the cup. "Regret is a rich man's hobby," he said. "I preferred patience, and patience buys power." I leaned back, trying to understand him, not just as my grandfather, but as the man who let his own son strip him of everything, and waited. "They built everything on paper," he said. "Let's see how they handle paper fighting back." That was when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Clara. My thumb hovered, then pressed. "Hello?" Her voice was frantic. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. "Dad's screaming, threatening to sue the board. He said you filed something, some kind of letter. Rowan, what the hell is going on?" I heard noise in the background, voices raised, glass breaking. "The will's being reviewed. They said Ephraim changed it. He's losing control." She paused. "Is it true?" I swallowed hard, then said softly, "He's not losing control. He just never really had it." I ended the call. Ephraim didn't need to ask. I nodded once. The fuse is burning. We stayed in that cafe another hour. Neither of us spoke much. The storm had started, but for now, we were in the eye of it, everything eerily still. Outside, snow began to fall again. Not the harsh, blinding snow of Christmas Eve. This was gentler, quiet, a blanket, not a weapon. It softened the city's edges, gave the illusion that things were calm. Ephraim placed a hand on mine. "Don't get comfortable. The real war starts when they realize they've already lost. I didn't respond, just stared out the window, watching the flakes melt on the glass, the tick of the pocket watch faint in my coat. As we stepped out onto the sidewalk, heading back toward the garage, a black car rolled slowly to a stop across the street. Tinted windows, sleek body, expensive and quiet. It didn't belong in this neighborhood. The rear window lowered an inch. Inside, I saw him, Gavin. He wasn't yelling this time. He wasn't slamming fists or shouting insults across a dining table. No, now he was quiet, focused. The kind of silence that precedes something cruel. He leaned forward just enough to whisper to his driver, "Find out what's in that letter, and make sure neither of them leaves town." That same night, after the cafe and after Gavin's car disappeared into the Denver fog, I drove us back to the vineyard. No words were exchanged. Ephraim just stared out the window like he was counting shadows. I didn't sleep. Again. By the second evening, things felt still. Too still. I took a walk through the vineyard alone. The snow had stopped falling, but it clung to the skeletal vines like frostbite on bone. Under the dim moonlight, they looked more like scars than crops. Ephraim stood on the porch behind me, his coat buttoned high. He didn't speak until I came back up the steps. "It's quiet," I said, almost daring to feel peace. He shook his head. "That's the sound before a storm." A second later, my phone started buzzing. First, an email from the Bar Association. Notice of temporary suspension pending review. Then 3 missed calls from my old firm, a voicemail from the managing partner. "You need to clear this up immediately. We can't be dragged into this." And then the headline that made my stomach turn cold. Durrell family heir accused of exploiting ailing patriarch. Legal war erupts over estate. A local news station played a clip from Gavin's interview. He was polished, even wore a subtle navy tie, the one he always saved for crisis PR. "We've done everything we can to care for my father in his final years," he said to the camera, voice trembling in just the right places. But unfortunately, some people, even family, see illness as opportunity. They aired blurry footage of me walking into the law firm. The angle made it look like I was sneaking in. Ephraim turned off the TV. I just sat there, staring at the black screen like I could burn a hole through it. "They're faster than I expected," he muttered. I picked up the remote and slammed it against the floor. Pieces scattered. "They're destroying me, Grandpa. Everything. My license. My name. I'm done." He didn't flinch, just looked at me, calm as ever. "Let them. A lie needs to run fast before the truth catches up." That didn't help. Not right then. Not when the people I'd worked with for years were suddenly forwarding statements to the press saying no comment. Not when reporters were already circling our gate. I stormed outside. Ephraim followed slowly. The vineyard stretched in front of us like a battlefield buried in snow. "Do you know why we cut back the vines in winter?" he asked quietly, as we stopped at the edge of the field. I shook my head. "Because the branches have to bleed before they grow stronger. You cut away the dead weight, the disease, the lies. That's how the sweet fruit comes back." It should have sounded like one of his metaphors, old man wisdom. But standing there, hearing him say it like that, it landed. He wasn't talking about the vineyard. He was talking about me. The next morning, a knock came at the door. A courier. I signed the form, opened the envelope. A restraining order, filed by my own father. Effective immediately. I wasn't allowed near the estate or any Durrell-owned properties. Just like that, I was legally erased from the places I'd spent my entire life trying to earn a place in. That afternoon, messages trickled in. Former colleagues, classmates, even Clara, cold, brief, apologetic in tone, but not in meaning. Sorry, we need to pause communication until the matter's resolved. Hope this all clears up for you. Best of luck. People have a way of rewriting history when it benefits them. I sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand, heart numb. They've taken everything, I said to Ephraim. My name, my work, my dignity. He set down his teacup, then pulled a small USB drive from his coat and slid it across the table. Not everything. You still have the truth. And me. I looked down at the drive. What's this? Proof, he said. Emails, documents, audio files, all of it. Every lie they ever told. Documented. It sat in my palm like a weapon. I stared at it, then at the pocket watch resting beside it. Truth and time, one in each hand. I stood up, not in rage, but in silence, walked out the front door and into the snow-covered yard. I dropped to my knees, not from weakness. I just needed the earth, the cold, something real. They'll never stop, I whispered, gripping the drive tight. Ephraim stepped beside me, not speaking at first. Then finally, neither will you. That's when I felt it. Not vengeance, not rage, but resolve. Like something inside me had finally stopped asking for fairness, for justice served cold and clean. I wasn't waiting anymore. I rose slowly, pocketing the USB beside the watch. 2 truths ticking in time. That evening, as the sun faded behind the hills, I sat across from Ephraim one last time. If they want a war, I said quietly, I'll give them one, but I'll fight it my way. He gave a small nod, like he'd been waiting for that. Then let's make sure you win it. The next morning, I didn't wake up to sunlight. I woke up to sirens outside my door. It started as a distant whine, then closed in like a wave. I pulled back the curtain, and there they were. 3 black and white cruisers, 1 unmarked sedan, red and blue lights bouncing off the snowy fields. Behind them, reporters, microphones, cameras, a feeding frenzy. Ephraim was already dressed, coat on, shoes laced. He stood by the fireplace, calm as if he'd known this was coming. When the knock came, it wasn't a tap. It was a demand. 2 officers, one held a folded piece of paper, the other, hand already resting on his belt. Rowan Durrell? I nodded. You're under investigation for financial fraud and elder abuse. Step outside, sir. My throat tightened, but Ephraim didn't move from where he stood. He met my eye and spoke with measured weight. Do as they say. The truth doesn't panic. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I let them handcuff me on my own porch. Cameras flashed like fireworks. The click of metal on my wrists was louder than any headline that followed, but the headlines came fast. By noon, I was the nation's favorite villain. Greedy grandson exploits aging patriarch, arrested outside family estate. Inside the cruiser, I stared straight ahead. The vineyard grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Familiar rows blurred into the gray distance. They wanted to bury me. They forgot I've been underground before. At the station, the questions came in waves. Relentless, rehearsed, loaded. Fake bank transfers. Forged emails with my signature. Edited audio clips. One that made it sound like I was threatening Gavin. It wasn't just revenge. It was a full-blown rewrite of reality. Gavin's money had bought scripts, actors, and a stage. Now I was the lead in a play I never auditioned for. After hours of interrogation, they released me, pending further investigation. A lawyer, paid for quietly by Ephraim, stood at the curb, waiting. I didn't speak the whole ride home. When we pulled up to the farmhouse, the sky was already darkening. The world had flipped while I was gone. Ephraim was at the table, laptop open, glasses on. When I stepped inside, he didn't look up. "You didn't think I gave you that flash drive to collect dust, did you?" He hit the spacebar. Footage played. Crisp, clear, time-stamped. Gavin, on hidden camera, laughing. "He'll sign anything. He doesn't even read anymore." Lorraine. "As long as he thinks we're moving money for his medical care, we can shift it all." Gavin again. "Rowan's too emotional to play this game. He'll yell, we'll stay quiet, and no one believes the loud one." I stood there, frozen, not in disbelief, in purpose. "We don't send this to the media," I said. Ephraim raised an eyebrow. "No? No. Let them keep talking. Then, we let the proof talk louder." We stayed up all night. No shouting, no plans of vengeance, just silence and strategy. By 3 a.m., the videos, encrypted and untraceable, were sent directly to the Board of Trustees, the firm's compliance office, and one anonymous whistleblower email within Gavin's own company. No press release, no social post, just truth. Quiet and deadly. I turned off the light and whispered into the dark. "They built their kingdom on lies. Let's see how it stands without them." By the next morning, the wind had shifted. First came the statement from the law firm. "Due to newly surfaced material evidence, we are suspending all actions pending legal clarification." Then came the leak. An anonymous post on a legal ethics forum. The footage, the audio, the forged emails, lined up against originals from Ephraim's archive. By noon, it had gone viral. Not because of me, but because someone inside Gavin's circle had shared it. Maybe they got scared. Maybe they were tired of pretending. Or maybe they just wanted out before the house fell. The media that crucified me now tripped over itself to rewrite the narrative. New evidence reveals deeper conspiracy in Durrell family saga. Who is Rowan Durrell Dilly? Gavin's firm issued a no comment. Lorraine disappeared from every public platform. Their foundation website went offline. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was silence. And this time, it was theirs. That evening, I sat on the porch. The vineyard stretched out before me, calm, quiet. The vines didn't care who lied or who ruled. They just endured. Ephraim came out with 2 mugs of tea, sat beside me without a word. "They're collapsing," I said. He took a slow sip. "They were already collapsing. We just stopped holding them up." The sky was lavender with dusk. Somewhere in the hills, an owl called once, low and distant. Then my phone rang. Clara. Her voice was trembling, almost distant. "Dad's gone." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean gone?" He left the estate. He took something from the vault before he disappeared." "What did he take?" She paused, swallowed. "They say it has your name on it." I stood, the air colder now than when I woke up. "Then this storm isn't over yet." The next time I saw my father, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was at a funeral. A cold rain drizzled over Denver as we pulled up to the cathedral. The stone arches stood like solemn guards, weathered but unshaken. Bells tolled slowly, their echoes hollow, like a memory you try to forget but can't. I stood in the entryway for a long minute, coat dripping, the collar turned up more out of habit than style. Ephraim was beside me in a wheelchair again, not because he needed it, but because perception still mattered. People respected an elder in a chair more than one standing with quiet power. The place was full. Suits, veils, umbrellas still folded under pews. Faces I hadn't seen in years, gathered now to mourn a man who wore masks better than anyone. On the altar, a massive screen played a soft-lit montage. Gavin laughing with donors, cutting ribbons, giving his grandchildren Christmas gifts. A narrator's voice called him a pillar of community, a man of vision, a devoted father. I barely blinked. Even in death, I muttered, he's rewriting the story. Ephraim didn't look away from the screen. Then you rewrite the ending. We sat in the back. Neither of us prayed. The eulogy dragged on. Too polished, too choreographed. No one cried. They dabbed their eyes like actors finishing a matinee. Then came the twist. The family lawyer stepped up to the podium, holding a remote in his shaking hand. There is one final message Gavin requested be shared, should this day come. He pressed the button. Gavin's face appeared on screen, thinner, paler than the version in the montage, but just as controlled. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, he began, then I've lost everything. But I'll say this. I did what I had to do, to protect my name, my legacy. I made choices that others may not agree with, but I made them for my family. He paused, sipped from a glass just off frame. I never asked for forgiveness. I only asked that my side be remembered. And then the screen flickered. The room stirred. A few heads tilted. The video resumed, but the tone had shifted. The same camera angle, same room. But Gavin now slouched, tie loosened, drink half spilled. He muttered into the camera, unaware it was still rolling. He signed whatever I gave him. Old man didn't even ask. And Rowan, he had his chance. Too soft. Always thinking with his heart. Never learned. If you want to stay on top, you've got to cut below the belt. Laughter. His. Lorraine's voice, faint in the background. You think they'll ever find out? She asked. Doesn't matter. By the time they do, I'll be too far gone to care. Then another voice. Ephraim's, clear and calm. You forgot, Gavin. You left the camera running. The room fell dead silent. A gasp echoed from the front pew. Lorraine dropped her purse. Her head fell into her hands. Reporters fumbled with phones, trying not to be obvious. I stood, not in anger, not to grandstand, but because someone had to. They said I exploited a dying man, I said, eyes scanning the room. Said I forged papers, threatened family. But you all saw what truth looks like. It doesn't yell, it just waits. I looked at the screen. My father's image froze on the last frame. Half smile, full lie. He told the world I was a thief, I added, but truth doesn't rot. It outlives us. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. Ephraim sat still, eyes closed, as if listening for something beyond words. By nightfall, it was everywhere. The confession, the glitch, the scandal. News anchors stumbled through headlines trying to undo weeks of spin. Video bombshell rocks Durrell funeral. From accused to avenged, Rowan Durrell's redemption. Ephraim's legal team released the full video. Every frame, every voice, every timestamp. It couldn't be edited, couldn't be spun. It was raw, final. The forged will was voided within 24 hours. The estate, the vineyard, the Denver property, even the rights to the Durrell Foundation name, all reverted to me. But I didn't celebrate. I walked out of the cathedral alone. The rain hadn't let up. Each drop felt heavier than it should have. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. Just quiet. I won, I whispered to no one. So why does it feel like I buried more than one man today? Behind me, Ephraim's voice came like a slow echo. Because you didn't just lose a father, Rowan. You lost the illusion of one. Outside, wind whipped along the marble steps. I reached into my coat and pulled out the old pocket watch, the one Ephraim gave me that night in the cellar. It ticked, steady, unshaken. You were right, Grandpa, I said under my breath. Time exposes liars. I didn't pocket it again. I let it tick in my hand. That night, back at the vineyard, we sat by the fire, the same spot where I once collapsed after they cast me out. Same flames, different man. What happens now? I asked quietly. Ephraim didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire like it owed him something. Now, he said at last, you rebuild, but this time, not for them, for yourself. We didn't speak again. We didn't need to. The fire cracked, warm against the storm outside. I looked into the flames and asked softly, You think the dead rest easy, Grandpa? He didn't flinch, just stared ahead. Only the ones who made peace, he replied. The rest keep watching. I thought it was over, until I found the final letter hidden inside his coffin. A week had passed since the funeral. The media trucks had moved on. The headlines faded just as fast as they'd flared up. Around the vineyard, the snow gave way to thawing soil, revealing patches of green like timid beginnings. Everything was quieter, except inside me. Days were filled with paperwork, settlement meetings, and the occasional handshake from someone who used to avoid eye contact. I managed the daily affairs of the estate. Ephraim rested more, still sharp, but his energy dipped like the end of a long harvest. We didn't talk much, but he always noticed. You look like a man still waiting on a verdict, he said one evening, as we shared leftover soup by the fire. Maybe I am, I replied, not knowing from who or what. That night, Clara arrived unannounced. She looked different, softer, not broken, just tired in a way I understood. She held out a small envelope sealed in black wax. They found it in Dad's coffin. The lawyer said it was addressed to you. I stared at it for a moment. My fingers brushed the wax seal, the old family crest barely legible beneath time and pressure. I broke it without ceremony. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper, my father's handwriting, slanted, precise, proud even in its final breath. Rowan, I spent my life trying to prove I wasn't weak like my father. Or you. But I see now I mistook kindness for weakness. When I hit you that night, I wasn't punishing you. I was punishing the part of me that never learned to love without control. You are stronger than I ever was. Take care of the vineyard. It deserves a better man than me. Dad, I read it once. Then again. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't well. I just exhaled, a breath that had waited decades to leave. Ephraim found me by the window, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one and stood beside me in silence. We watched the vines outside, their outlines silvered by early frost. What did he say? He asked quietly. He finally told the truth. And does it change anything? Maybe not the past, but it changes me. We didn't toast. We just sipped like men who'd seen too much to waste time pretending. Later that night, I walked out into the vineyard, the letter folded in my coat. The cold didn't bother me. I stopped by a vine near the center of the field, the same one Ephraim once stood beside when he taught me about roots and frost. I knelt, dug a shallow hole with my hand, and placed the letter inside, covered it gently. Let something good grow from this, I whispered. As I stood, the pocket watch in my coat clicked once, louder than usual, like it had been holding its breath too. Weeks passed. Spring crept in like an old friend returning home. The vineyard woke up. New shoots, new workers, new rhythms. The media moved on to fresher scandals. We opened the tasting room again. First time in years. We called the new wine line Second Harvest. At the opening ceremony, I said a few words. Nothing grand. Some inherit money, others inherit silence, but the best inheritance is the courage to start again. They clapped, quietly, respectfully. No cheers, just warmth. Later that evening, I walked to the far edge of the field alone. No fanfare, no flashbulbs, just the sky, the vines, and that quiet ticking in my pocket. I looked up at the stars. Time exposes liars, I said softly, but it also forgives survivors. A breeze stirred the vines. For a second, I swore I heard them answer. I smiled and walked back home. Grandpa was right. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of winning.